He didn't mean to reach for the wood, until he saw her hands trembling and realized she still wouldn't let go. The rope burns were fresh against her palms, dust clinging to the sweat along her wrists as the bundle dragged behind her with a low scrape across the yard. He stepped in without asking, his fingers closing over the weight just as she tightened her grip, not yielding, not even looking at him. The wind rattled the loose boards, her breath steady, stubborn, like stopping had never been an option, and he couldn't tell if she was holding on to the wood or something else. "Stay with me. Tell me where you're watching from." The land out past Dry Ridge didn't belong to anyone who needed comfort. It stretched wide and pale under a thin Dakota sky, wind cutting across it like something with a purpose. Fences leaned where they had been mended too many times. A narrow dirt road ran along the edge of it, pressed flat by wagon wheels and hooves, then disappeared into nothing. Lorraine Hayes lived at the end of that road. Her house sat low against the ground, boards weathered to a gray that matched the earth. Smoke came from the chimney most mornings, steady, never hurried. By sunup, she was already outside, moving from one task to the next without pause. A hammer rested in her apron pocket. A coil of wire hung from a nail by the door. Everything had its place. Everything had been earned. That morning, she was dragging a length of split pine across the yard. The rope bit into her palms. Her boots slid once in the dust, then held. She didn't stop. She leaned forward and pulled again, steady, breath measured, as if the effort had already been decided long before the work began. The sound of hooves came from the road. Ethan Cole slowed his horse without thinking. He had passed this place more times than he could count. Knew the crooked fence post near the gate, the way the latch hung loose if you didn't lift it right. Knew the shape of the house, the line of trees behind it. But he had never seen her like this. Not really seen her. She pulled again. The log shifted, caught on a stone. She adjusted her grip and kept going. Ethan rested his hand on the saddle horn and watched for a second longer than he meant to. "You shouldn't carry that alone," he said. It came out easy, like something he had said 100 times before in 100 places that didn't matter. Lorraine didn't look up. "I've been doing it for years." Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't tired either, just plain, like the ground under her boots. The wind moved through the yard, lifting a loose strand of her hair, then dropping it back against her cheek. She pulled the rope again. The log slid free. Ethan nodded once, though she hadn't looked at him. He tapped his heel lightly, and the horse moved on. The road took him away, past the ridge and down toward the creek where the cattle grazed. By midday, the sun had burned off what little chill the morning held. Work filled the hours the way it always did. Fences to check, a lame steer to look at, a stretch of dry ground that needed watching. Still, the image stayed. Not the work, not the log. The way she hadn't stopped. The next morning, he came back. He told himself it was the fence. That gate had been leaning for weeks now. Anyone riding that road could see it. It would need fixing before winter came on. He didn't knock. The yard was quiet when he stepped through the gate. The hinge gave a long, tired creak. He set his tools down near the post, pulled the latch free, and began to work. The wood was soft near the base. He cut it clean, set a new brace, drove the nails in slow and sure. The sound carried across the yard in steady strikes. Not loud, not asking for attention. Halfway through, he felt it. He glanced up. Lorraine stood on the porch, one hand resting against the frame of the door. She had a cup in the other, tin, steam curling faint in the cool air. She watched him the way a person watches something they have not yet decided about. Not surprised, not grateful, just watching. Ethan set another nail, drove it in, checked the line of the post. He didn't say anything. After a while, she turned slightly, shifted her weight, and took a sip from the cup. Her gaze didn't leave him. The wind picked up again, brushing against the side of the house, rattling something loose along the roofline. When he finished, he tested the gate once. It held firm. He wiped his hands on his jeans, picked up his tools, and stepped back through. Lorraine hadn't moved. Their eyes met for a moment. Not long. Just enough. Then he nodded, the same way he had the day before. She didn't nod back. He closed the gate behind him and walked to his horse. By the time he rode off, the creek was gone. The house stood the same as it had before, only now there was something in the space between the porch and the road that hadn't been there yesterday, and neither of them had named it. The wind carried on across the open land, as if it hadn't noticed a thing. But the next time Ethan reached the bend in the road, he didn't look away. He looked back, and she was still standing there. The road bent past the ridge, but he held that image longer than he should have. The porch, the cup in her hand, the way she hadn't moved, as if motion itself required a reason she wasn't willing to spend. By the time he reached the low creek crossing, the horse had slowed on its own. Ethan let it. The water ran thin over stone, making that quiet sound it always made this time of year. He sat there a minute, then another, reins loose in his hand. There was a length of fence along her north line that dipped where the ground softened after rain. He had seen it plenty of times. It would need fixing. He turned the horse. The next time he came, it was later in the morning. The light had warmed the yard enough to bring out the smell of dry earth and old wood. The gate didn't creak now. It opened clean. He carried wire and a hammer this time, worked along the fence without looking toward the house more than he had to, cut the sagging section free, set new posts where the soil held better, pulled the wire tight until it sang low when he let it go. Somewhere behind him, a screen door opened and shut. He kept working. Bootsteps crossed the yard, slow and even. He heard them stop a few feet away, then the sound of something being set down on the ground. A tin cup. "Water," she said. He straightened, took it. Their fingers brushed once, just enough to register. He drank. The water was cool, drawn fresh. He handed the cup back without comment. "Fence needed fixing," he said. "I noticed," Lorraine answered. She didn't ask him why he had come, didn't thank him. She lifted the cup and turned back toward the house, leaving him with the wire pulled tight and the posts standing straighter than before. By midday, the work was done. He stayed a moment longer than necessary, checking the line again, then another stretch beyond it that didn't need checking at all. When he finally walked back through the gate, the yard was quiet again. Only this time the cup was gone from the step. In town, word moved the way it always did, not fast, just steady enough to find its place. Ethan stood at the counter of Eleanor Pike's store that afternoon, counting out nails onto the worn wood surface. The ledger lay open beside her, pencil tucked behind one ear. "You've been riding north more than usual," she said, not looking up. "Work," he answered. "Mm-hmm." She wrapped the nails in paper, folded it neat, set it down in front of him. Her hands paused a second longer than they needed to. "That Hayes place out there," she went on, voice easy. "Been quiet a long time." Ethan picked up the bundle. "Still is." Eleanor's mouth moved just enough to suggest she might say something else. Then she didn't. She turned the page in the ledger instead. Outside, the boardwalk creaked under his boots. A wagon rolled past slow, wheels grinding against packed dirt. Across the street, two men stood by the hitch rail, talking low. One of them glanced his way, then away again. It wasn't anything. Not yet. Back at the Hayes place, the changes came small. The woodpile stood straighter. The loose board along the shed no longer rattled in the wind. The gate opened without sound. Lorraine moved through it all the same as before. Same pace, same steady rhythm. But once or twice that she paused at the edge of the yard and looked out toward the road longer than she needed to. One afternoon, she sat on the porch step with her coffee, watching the light shift across the fence line he had fixed. Her thumb traced the rim of the cup without her noticing. From the far side of the property, a horse came into view. Marcus Hayes rode in from the south, dust rising behind him. He swung down before the horse had fully stopped, eyes already moving across the yard. The fence, the gate, the stacked wood. He led the horse to the rail and tied it off, slow. "You been busy," he said, not looking at her. Lorraine took a sip from the cup. "Things needed doing." Marcus nodded once, walked over to the fence line, ran his hand along the wire. It held firm. "Didn't look like that last week." "No." He stood there a moment, then turned back toward the house. His gaze moved across the yard again, slower this time, taking measure. "Someone been helping," he said. Lorraine didn't answer right away. She set the cup down beside her. "The work's done," she said. Marcus watched her, waiting for something more. It didn't come. That evening, as the sun dropped low and the wind picked up again, the gate opened once more. Ethan stepped through, carrying a coil of rope over one shoulder. He stopped when he saw Marcus standing by the porch. The two men looked at each other across the yard. Marcus shifted his weight, just enough to make the distance between them feel measured. "Fence looks good," he said. Ethan nodded. "Needed it." Silence settled in, not heavy. Just there. Lorraine stood from the porch step and picked up her cup. She moved past them both, down into the yard, toward the woodpile. Ethan watched her go, just a second too long. Marcus saw it, not the look itself, the length of it. And that was enough. "Fence needed fixing," Marcus said again, quieter this time. Ethan met his eyes. "Yeah." Marcus held that for a moment, then turned away, as if filing something he hadn't yet decided what to do with. The wind moved through the yard, carrying dust and the faint smell of pine. Nothing had been said, but something had started to take shape, and neither of them had named it. Not yet. The days kept moving the way they always did. Wind in the mornings, dust in the afternoons. The kind of quiet that settles into a place and stays there because no one has reason to break it. Ethan stayed away 2 days. On the third, he found himself riding toward the creek without deciding to. The path cut low through cottonwoods, the ground softer there, the air cooler. Water ran steady over stone, the same sound it had made every year before and would make every year after. Marcus was already there. He stood near the bank, one boot up on a rock, hat pushed back just enough to show his face in full. He didn't turn when Ethan dismounted, just picked up a small stone and sent it across the surface. It skipped once, then sank. Ethan walked down the slope, slow, stopped a few feet away. For a while, neither of them spoke. The creek filled the space. Marcus bent, picked up another stone, turned it in his fingers. Then he said it, plain. "You don't look at her like a neighbor." Ethan didn't move. The words settled between them, heavier than they sounded. Marcus tossed the stone. It hit the water flat and disappeared without a sound. "I've been watching," he went on. "Fence, wood. You showing up when I ain't there." A pause. "You think I wouldn't notice?" Ethan looked out over the water. Sunlight caught the current in broken lines. "I noticed," Marcus said again, quieter now. "The way you stand in the yard. The way you wait before you leave." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't meant to hold. "I know," he said. Marcus turned then, fully. His eyes were steady, not angry, not yet. You gonna tell me I'm wrong? Ethan shook his head once. No. That was all. No excuse. No explanation. Marcus stood there, taking that in. Something shifted in his face. Not sudden, not sharp, just enough to show where the ground under him had moved. You could have lied, he said. Ethan didn't answer. You always did before, Marcus added. Little things. Didn't matter. This one. He trailed off, jaw tightening just a touch. This one matters. The wind moved through the trees above them. Leaves brushed against each other in a low, steady sound. Marcus stepped back from the water. You were the one man I didn't have to question. The sentence didn't rise, didn't fall. It just stayed there. Ethan looked at him then. For real this time. Like he was trying to find something to say that wouldn't make it worse. There wasn't anything. I ain't done anything, Ethan said finally. Marcus gave a short, humorless breath. That's what you think. He picked up his hat from the rock and settled it back on his head, adjusted it the way he always did when he needed a second to get himself straight. Town's already talking, he went on. You think folks don't see a man riding the same stretch of road every day? Ethan's jaw set a little. I don't care about talk. Marcus nodded once. Maybe you don't. A beat. But she's the one who hears it. That landed different. Ethan's gaze dropped to the water again. The current kept moving, same as before, like nothing had changed. Marcus watched him for a long moment. Then he stepped past him, heading back up the bank. I ain't gonna tell you what to do, he said over his shoulder. I don't get to do that. He stopped halfway up, turned just enough to be heard clear. But don't stand there pretending this is nothing. Ethan didn't answer. Marcus held it a second longer. Then he walked on, boots crunching over dry ground, the sound fading as he reached the ridge. The creek went back to being just a creek. Ethan stayed there a while after, longer than he meant to. When he finally mounted up, the sun had shifted west, shadows stretching thin across the water. He didn't ride toward the Hayes place. He rode the other way. Back at the house, Lorraine worked through the evening the same as always. Kindling stacked near the stove. A pot set low over the flame. The door left open just enough to let the heat drift out. At one point, she stepped outside with a bundle of wood in her arms, crossed the yard to the pile. Set it down. Her hands stayed on it a second longer than they needed to. The gate stood straight now, quiet. The road beyond it lay empty. Wind moved across the open land, carrying voices from far off. Men talking near the store. A laugh. Then something lower, harder to make out. Lorraine didn't turn toward it. She picked up another piece of wood, set it in place and reached for the next. Inside, the fire caught steady. Outside, the light dropped slow. And for the first time in a long while, the silence in the yard didn't feel the same. Morning came like it always did. Wind across the boards, coffee set on the stove before the sun cleared the ridge. Lorraine moved through it without pause. Same steps, same order, same quiet. But now and then, she stopped. Not long, just enough to stand with one hand resting on the table, as if she had forgotten what came next. The gate didn't creak anymore. That was the first thing she noticed. She opened it one morning to let the chickens out, and paused, hand still on the latch. It swung easy, closed without sound. She stood there a second longer than needed, then turned back to the yard. The woodpile had begun to lean. Not much, just enough that one side dipped lower than the other. She restacked part of it, straightened a row, then left the rest as it was. By midday, the wind had picked up. It rattled the loose board on the shed, the one Ethan had meant to fix next. It struck the same note again and again, hollow and uneven. She let it. Days passed. No horse on the road, no shadow crossing the yard in the late afternoon. The fence line held. The gate stayed quiet. The work kept coming, same as always. Only now, there was space where something had been. Lorraine sat on the porch more often, not doing anything, just sitting, coffee in hand, gone cold more times than she noticed. Her eyes stayed on the road without seeming to. Inside, the chair near the window stayed pulled out, as if someone had left it that way and might come back to finish the thought. Marcus watched it all without asking. He came in from the south fields one evening, boots dusted pale, hat low against the wind. He stopped at the edge of the yard, looking over the place the way a man does when something feels off but hasn't broken yet. His gaze moved from the fence to the woodpile, to the porch, to her. She didn't look up. He walked over, slow, stood a few feet from the steps. "You didn't fix that board," he said, nodding toward the shed. Lorraine took a sip from the cup. "It's holding." Marcus glanced at it again. It wasn't. He didn't say anything more. That night, the wind came harder. It pushed against the house, found every loose edge and made itself known. The board struck its hollow note again, steady as a clock. Lorraine lay awake longer than she needed to. At some point, she rose, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch. The night was cold enough to bite. The sky clear, stars sharp above the ridge. The yard lay still. The road was empty. She stood there a while, arms folded against the chill. Then she stepped down, crossed the yard, and set her hand against the leaning woodpile. It shifted slightly under her touch. She left it there. Marcus saw her from the doorway. He didn't call out. The next morning, he saddled his horse before the light had fully come in. Checked the straps twice. Took a length of rope from the nail by the door and coiled it tight. Lorraine stood by the stove, back to him. "You heading south?" she asked. "No." She didn't turn. "Then where?" Marcus pulled his hat low. "Creek." That was all. He stepped out, the door closing soft behind him. The horse shifted under him once, then settled. Hooves struck the packed dirt, fading as he rode out toward the ridge. The path to the creek felt shorter than usual. Ethan was there. Not by the water this time. Up on the rise, sitting his horse without moving, as if he had been there a while and hadn't yet decided to leave. Marcus rode up and stopped a few feet away. They didn't speak at first. The wind moved across the grass, low and steady. A hawk circled high above, silent. "You're not riding north anymore," Marcus said. Ethan didn't look at him. "No." Marcus nodded once, like he had expected that. "She sits outside longer now." That got Ethan's attention. He turned slightly in the saddle. Not all the way. Just enough. Marcus kept his eyes on the horizon. "Don't do much different," he went on. "Same work, same pace." A pause. "Just stays there after." Ethan's hand tightened on the reins, just a little. The horse shifted under him, sensing it. Marcus finally looked at him. "I ain't here to make it easy on you." Ethan gave a short breath. "I didn't think you were." Marcus nodded again. "But I ain't here to stop it either." That settled between them. Ethan looked at him now, fully. Marcus held it. "If you come back," he said, then stopped. He took a second, like he was measuring the words before letting them go. "Don't leave halfway again." Ethan didn't answer. Marcus didn't wait for one. He turned his horse, guiding it back toward the ridge. After a few steps, he slowed, just enough to speak without turning. "She don't ask for anything," he said. "Never has." The wind carried the rest of it away. Marcus rode on. Ethan stayed where he was. The creek moved below. The land stretched wide around him, same as it had been the day before, and the day before that. Only now, there wasn't anywhere he could ride that didn't lead back. He sat there a long time before turning his horse. North. The ride back felt shorter than it should have. The wind had shifted. It came from the west now, carrying the smell of dry grass and distant smoke. Ethan kept his eyes on the line of the ridge, but the closer he got, the more familiar the land became. The bend in the road, the broken stump near the fence, the place where the ground dipped just enough to catch rainwater in the spring. Nothing had changed. That was the problem. He reached the gate near sundown. It opened clean just like before. No sound, no warning. Lorraine was in the yard. She had a bundle of wood in her arms. Not large, not small, just enough to carry if you were used to it. She didn't stop when she saw him, didn't turn, didn't speak. She took 2 more steps across the yard. The wood shifted slightly in her grip. One piece slid loose. She caught it against her hip and kept going. Ethan closed the gate behind him. He didn't say her name. He walked forward, steady, boots pressing into the same ground he had stood on before. When he reached her, he didn't ask. He took the weight from her arms, just like that. For a second, she held on, not pulling back, not giving way either, just holding the moment where it was. Then her hands let go. The wood stayed with him. He carried it to the pile and set it down, straightened a piece that had leaned out of line, adjusted another without thinking. Behind him, she hadn't moved. The wind passed through the yard, softer now. The light had turned low and gold, catching along the edge of the fence, the roofline, the dry grass near the road. Ethan turned back. She stood where he had left her, hands empty. They walked to the porch without speaking. The boards creaked once under his step. The sound stayed there, small but real. She noticed it. He saw her notice. They sat. 2 chairs, same distance as before, not closer, not farther. The mountains stretched out ahead of them, blue against the fading sky. Lorraine rested her hands in her lap. Her fingers were still, but not tight, just placed there, as if she had decided where they belonged for now. "I counted every reason this doesn't work," she said. Her voice came low, not tired, not uncertain, just measured. Ethan nodded once. "So did I." The words didn't solve anything. They didn't need to. The light shifted again. A bird crossed the sky, heading south. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a wagon wheel struck a rock and rolled on. They sat in it, not filling the space, not trying to move past it. Lorraine looked out at the fence line, where the wire held straight now, catching the last of the sun. "I'm tired," she said. He didn't answer. "I'm tired of carrying it all alone." The wind lifted slightly, brushing past them, moving through the open yard like it had done every day before. Ethan set his hands on his knees, then pushed himself up. The chair scraped lightly against the wood. He stepped across the small distance between them. Didn't rush it. Didn't hesitate either. He held out his hand. Not close enough to force. Not far enough to be uncertain. She looked at it. Not at him, not yet. Her gaze stayed on his hand, like she was weighing something she had already measured 100 times before. Then she placed hers in it. He pulled her to her feet, slow, careful, like anything sudden might break what had just been decided. They stood there, close now, the space between them smaller than it had ever been. She looked at him then. Really looked. The lines at the corner of her eyes. The way the light caught them. The way she didn't look away. Ethan leaned in. The kiss was quiet. No rush, no claim. Just enough to say what neither of them had said out loud. When they stepped back, nothing had changed. And everything had. From down the road came the sound of hooves. They didn't turn right away. When they did, Marcus was already near the gate. He opened it, slow, let it close behind him without sound. His eyes moved from one to the other, took in the distance between them, the way it had shifted. He didn't speak. He walked up to the porch and took the third chair, sat down, the wood held under him with a low, familiar creak. For a while, none of them said anything. The mountains darkened. The last of the light slipped behind the ridge. Ethan reached for the cup on the small table beside him, poured what was left into it from the pot, held it out. Marcus looked at it, then took it. No hesitation, no comment. He drank once, set it back in his lap, and leaned back in the chair. The three of them sat there as the evening settled in. The wind slowed. The yard held. And for the first time in a long while, nothing needed fixing. Not tonight. Somewhere in the dark, the land stretched on the same as always. But on that porch, something had been set down. And this time it stayed there. If you've ever carried something too long, something no one asked you to carry, but no one offered to take either, you know what that kind of quiet feels like. The kind that settles in your bones. The kind that teaches you how to keep going, even when no one's watching. Now imagine, just for a moment, someone steps into that silence. Not to take it from you, not to fix you, just to stand there. Steady, patient, willing to share the weight if you let them. That's not something you see coming. And it's not something you trust right away. But maybe that's where healing begins. Not in big gestures, not in words that sound right, in small things. A gate that no longer creaks, a chair pulled closer, a hand that doesn't leave when things get complicated. Lorraine didn't stop being strong. Ethan didn't try to change her. They just chose, quietly, carefully, not to carry everything alone anymore. And sometimes, that's enough. If you've ever had to make that kind of choice, or wished you had, tell me where you're listening from. I'd like to know. There are more stories like this waiting. Stories about people who don't give up, even when life gets heavy. If this one stayed with you, you might want to stay a little longer too.